Thank you, everybody. We're live from Cold Lake First Nations. Here we talk about caribou. We're talking about caribou and declining. Here to talk about the Section 11 we signed with Canada. It was a good experience going to Canada, and it's nice to meet people with the same kind of mind frame, because caribou has been declining since 2000, and something has to be done before it's too late. It's a part of our heritage. Not only our heritage, it's Canada heritage. And so that's why we went to Ottawa to get up some kind of plan. Because if we're going to pass down our traditions, something has to be done. Because we are caribou people, and caribou right across countries live in Dene territories. So I don't know where you want to get started here on Finn, or...
Yeah, so, we worked on this agreement for, 18 months or something like that, and it finally got signed before Christmas in Ottawa. I didn't go because I don't fly to Ontario this time of year, but one of the things that makes this agreement really unique is it's a nation-to-nation agreement. So there's an agreement between Cold Lake First Nations and Canada, not provinces, not oil companies, just between the Crown and Canada. It's only a 5-year term, so it doesn't lock us into anything over a really long period of time, but it gives us enough time to actually do things. Mm-hmm. It covers just the Alberta side of the CLAR, so there's other stuff on the Saskatchewan side we still have to do. This is just a first step down the road to dealing with all these issues, but it's an important one. It's going to create opportunities for CLFN members and for businesses in the field of restoration. And it's going to directly involve the nation in management of the weapons range, which is a really big step because our department has been pushing, Alberta and Canada and oil companies for years and years and years on management, and this is the first time we'll ever have a really big role to play in that.
Yeah, so we signed with Environment Canada and D&D and National Resources Canada. Alberta wasn't a signatory to it, but they support the project. Alberta is really in a tough spot, so we're just seeing what happens,
Give it a whirl.
Yeah. Something is better than nothing, right?
So yeah, and this is a really unique something. There aren't many of these type of agreements in Canada. I shouldn't say the real reason. One of the important reasons that we were able to do it was because of the CLAR. So the CLAR is a very unique piece of ground. It's provincial land that's leased to the federal government, and it's not easy for things to be done up there. So, I don't think that this could be replicated lots of places in Alberta, but it definitely worked here. One of the things that I think it's important to point out is that in this agreement, CLFN doesn't give anything up. So normally when CLFN signs an agreement, you get something in exchange for something. So what the nation's agreeing to do here is to take on a bunch of these actions that are going to help support caribou recovery over time.
So we're going to be needing people to work on this, probably 15 to 20 people. And there's 2 types of work, there's labor and equipment, and then there's the scientific stuff with Nunena, and we're willing to train our members, and maybe it's a good place to do practicum for some people, preferably members, because, that's me and my council. That's something we strive for, is putting our people to work. And yeah, restoration, abandoned wells. Let's start cleaning up some of this land, right? It'll be a long plan and process. We can revisit this every 5 years and see how it is, how we're doing, and we signed the agreement, I want to implement it, and it's just something dear to me, right? But if anybody's interested, we can share Tri-Res's information at the end of the slide, Maria. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to walk through for people what the issue with caribou is. So, caribou have been around in the boreal forest forever. They were an important species for Cold Lake First Nations back in the day when people sort of lived on the land out there, and they were available at certain times of year. And everybody knows the Dene drum, and the drum is made of caribou skin. It's one of the most important symbols, and our department has a responsibility to ensure that people make a livelihood today and are able to do it in the future. That's the livelihood for a livelihood approach. And so that means if people want to make their livelihood in the future, like hunting and trapping, like we need to keep that option open for them. And that won't work if there's no caribou. So the populations, like Kelsey said, have been declining since about 2000, maybe earlier. Like there's not a lot of good data before then. And so what happens is when populations in Canada are threatened, they get listed under the Species at Risk Act. And so that's a piece of legislation that then requires that, you know, plans are developed to save them from being extinct. So you can't actually just let a species go extinct in Canada. There's a law that prevents that. So that's sort of how we managed to get in on this issue. And one of the reasons that populations are declining, it's a complicated game between wolves and seismic lines. So moose and white-tailed deer populations are rising, and they're rising for a couple of reasons, one of which is climate change. So deer distribution is moving further north. Moose populations are going up, and part of this has to do with like more young forest. So when oil and gas moves in, they make a lot of openings in the forest, and deer and moose like that, what's called edge habitat. So their populations go up, and then there's more wolves because that's the primary food for wolves is deer and moose, and also beavers. But then the wolves put more pressure on the caribou population, and in the middle here is all these seismic lines. And caribou's whole strategy, how they evolved to survive, was they go and hide. Especially in the winter, they go to the poorest ecosystem types where there's not a lot of food, so there's not much else, and they stay there. And so when you get seismic lines that are opened up, the wolves are able to get them really easily. So that balance has shifted on the landscape, and it's shifted because of human activities. And so this map shows in purple is CLFN's traditional territory, Deneni Nene. Right now, in the Alberta side, we need to get that to 65% undisturbed. So only 35% disturbance. Right now it's 90% disturbed. So a lot of what's on that map needs to disappear and just become forest. Caribou need large blocks of undisturbed habitat in order to survive. That's where they live. The plans that are being conducted or constructed to deal with this problem are going to have an impact on Cold Lake First Nations. And if the nation doesn't do anything, it'll be a problem later. So some of the things that could happen are as industrial activity slows, that could mean that CLFN companies don't get as much work. A lot members might lose jobs. Wolf cull is going on. So that means that the government of Alberta is actually flying around in helicopters and shooting every wolf they can find. Like that's happening right now. They're sort of think they've got about 90% after 3 or 4 years. They're really only seeing about 10% of the wolves come back. So these recovery plans have a major impact on people, on their livelihoods, on their treaty and Aboriginal rights. And so that risk is why it's so important that the nation's involved. The Lands Department has developed some proposals for this to try to help manage some of these problems, and basically they come down to 3 tools. Some areas we should protect so that there's no more development; they're just habitat for wildlife. Some areas we should restore and put it back the way it was when people first came there, and some areas need closer management, and that's kind of how we'll break down some of these actions that'll occur.
Yeah, and we're looking at different other types of work, on road patrol. We're going to do a grant out to National Caribou Knowledge Consortium. We're trying, where's the balance, economics and the environment, and unfortunately the caribou's losing, biodiversity. Yeah, and talk about traditions, carrying on traditions, it's... we almost lost our tradition, so I think we should try to save them, in some way or another. Too bad there's there's a limit on caribou you can hunt, right? Because it'd be nice to eat caribou, but have to go travel way up north, and it's expensive to fly up north, and if we don't do nothing, maybe the only place we'll see a caribou is on a quarter, or we'll have to go to a zoo somewhere, right? Yeah. So.
Well, I was talking to somebody who was saying, he's like, man, I don't want to hear about the moose being next,
Yeah. Yeah, just so if we sort out the caribou, we can figure out this biodiversity, but I'm kind of on disagreement with wolf call and prey, and the poor wolf loses before, everything managed itself, and it all had a balance, and now, with industry, people encroaching on caribou lands, habitat, they're struggling, and talk about restoration, and have to do a lot of seismic lines right down to the abandoned wells. So it'll be a lot of work, in the first 10 years, and I want to get to that goal where there's 65% undisturbed habitat, but it's going to take time. I'll be long gone when that happens, but let's start somewhere, because Canada has its own laws, and maybe stuff will be shut down, like work, and it can really affect us, and talk about livelihood for livelihood, As a leader, it's hard because the need is so much out there, but I know it's kind of hard, Damned if you do or damned if you don't.
That's one of the things, right? If you protect landscapes, right? If you make sure that there's always protection for some habitat in there, then you don't end up in these situations where somebody has to make a decision about, are we going to have economic development or are we going to have environmental protection? You have to have both.
Yeah, and that's something we brought up when we signed our access agreement, in 5.2, it says protection of the environment. Yeah. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer because I can just go off, right? But
for a long time, there wasn't much that could be done, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is a step towards trying to deal with some of these issues, and it won't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Take a long time, so.
Yeah.
So hopefully the work we started here, hopefully it can pass down so we can get to that 65% undisturbed habitat. 80 years seems like a long time. I don't know, maybe we'll get a cup of life here and we'll be still sitting here 130 here or whatever.
But that's what it's really about, right? Is this agreement basically says that Cold Lake First Nations and Canada agree that we should get to that 65% undisturbed habitat number, and that there are some things we're going to do to sort of actively try to move towards that. Mm-hmm. And those are the joint recovery actions. Like Kelsey said, there's some parties to the agreement: CLFN, Environment Canada, National Defence, and Natural Resources Canada. So getting D&D on board was really important. None of this could happen if we couldn't get access to the weapons range. And so getting them to agree that this stuff needed to be done was key. Like I said, this is a nation-to-nation agreement, right? And it recognizes the important role that First Nations have to play in species recovery.
Yeah.
So some of the actions. So Kelsey talked a little bit about landscape restoration plan for boreal caribou. There's about 6,000 kilometers of seismic line that have to be restored. So almost every purple line on that map inside the caribou habitat has to be restored. That's going to be decades of work. After we restore it, we want to know how well it works. So this is a major investment into the landscape. It's really important that we track whether it's effective or not. And then the third piece is protection and conservation. So you want to make sure that you're protecting what's called critical caribou habitat, and actually that's a requirement. So under the law, Alberta has to show how they're enacting critical caribou habitat protection measures. Some other stuff. So another section of the agreement covers community capacity development. So one of the things that I'm really excited to try here is we're going to do a project on Dene law and implementing Dene law, because some people might say that, oh, well, there's no laws that cover CLFN members and their harvest, their activity on the lands, but there are actually a bunch of laws and rules, right? We're getting close to the time when you can't shoot a moose anymore, eh?
Yeah, just so, it's like everything had a balance before, we had laws, teachings were passed on, we knew when to hunt, when not to hunt, right? So, even caribou, you know, it was part of our circle of life. You know, we knew when to hunt them and when not to, you know. Like, we didn't take too much, you know. We just took what we needed, right? I mean, with everything else. And, yeah, like, it's time we should revisit our own laws, right? Us as a nation, you know. It's good to have laws, but to implement them is another thing, you know, and it's a challenge. So hopefully we can implement the agreement we did, and you know, and work for the better. And it's going to take a lot of money, lots of money to restore the land. I don't really have exact numbers, but it's in the 2-digit millions anyways, you know.
Yeah, it's going to be a major project over years. And so Cold Lake is just one range. So there's about 6,000 kilometers of seismic line in the Cold Lake area. Across Alberta, that number's like about 240,000.
Wow.
So it's a huge project. Like, you know, it's going to take decades to undo the disturbance that was done for the oil and gas industry.
It'll be a good experience for people too, for members to get back out on the land, you know, and you know, be working in different types of areas, you know. And who knows? Maybe jump on a helicopter today, you know, do some monitoring, you know, counts. You know, it's just like, it's endless when you talk about work and scientific, you know, and yeah, it will be a good opportunity to get somebody that works in the field and science, you know, and traditional knowledge, you know, and to be a guardian of the land, you know, stewards of the land. So that's what we're doing about the Guardian pilot project. You know, maybe you can mention something about that.
Yeah, so the quote-unquote Guardian initiative is something that's going on across Canada. And so we wrote some proposals, and we didn't get those funded through the national pilot program. So we're going to sort of start our own, and we're kind of working on it now. We're trying some of the pieces that we think are going to be key, but the end game of this is we want to develop, this is the tool by which we'll develop, you know, membership into people who want to, you know, go and be part of Caribou recovery, people who can, you know, wear our uniform and represent the nation on the land, you know, people who know and uphold Dene law. Like.
Yeah, and this would be good to have our own, you know, our own knowledge, our own, you know, so we don't have to go else. This is be ours, you know, our knowledge, our, you know, our whatever we do with Caribou, it'll be all ours. We already have our own research center there in eBay, and you know, sky's the limit.
Yeah. So we're gonna do a lot of sort of science and research work with some of the federal partners. So Natural Resources Canada is a research arm. That's what they do is research and, you know, and commercializing, you know, some of that research. So there's lots of opportunity there.
Oh yeah, and there'll be like vegetation surveys, you know, be tree planting, you know, using native species, and
yeah.
You know, if anybody knows anybody that, you know, that are interested in this field, this is a good opportunity for them. Now, you know, it could be a career. It just won't be a job. It's actually a career. You know, and a lot of people feel very deep about this, right? Because, like, how much is too much, right? And there has to be a balance, like I mentioned earlier. And, you know, it's scary. How are the caribou going to be when I'm gone? I'm hoping they're here for many moons to come.
Yeah, and like, yeah, just to build on what Kelsey said there. So caribou, all wildlife, are this complicated interplay between other wildlife species and then vegetation. So that's one of the reasons that caribou are a cool thing to work on from a conservation standpoint, is they need specific types of things on the landscape, and if we carve them all up with seismic lines, or we put the wolf population all out of balance, then they suffer, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, there has to be more research done in science, you know, when you talk about native species and whatnot, and even the food the caribou eats, you know, lichen. And if there's anybody out there in Canada that's a specialist in lichen and can grow it, please approach us. We can really use your help. So, you know, we can use everybody's help, you know. And if Alberta, you're listening, you know, I hope you come out and help us on this adventure, right? Because you know, we are your partner, right?
So like, this next one's important. So Kelsey was talking about balance. So, the land got out of balance, and then the wolf population got out of balance, and then they took out all the wolves. So now there's no wolves. But what do you think is going to happen to the deer and the moose population?
Like the cougars.
Yeah.
Don't forget the cougars.
They're all going up, right? So the thing that normally kept a lid on, some of these populations is now just like rising uncontrollably. So there needs to be a better approach to not only predator management, but also like deer and moose management. And so because nobody else can hunt in the weapons range, it's like literally just Cold Lake First Nations members. And hunting is the way that the province controls those populations, is by issuing hunting tags, right? And then accounting for Indigenous harvest. And so that problem is going to be all on CLFN. Unless you want to hear about someone going out and doing, shooting moose with a helicopter or deer, like nobody wants that.
Oh, I know. I can shoot all the deer you want. I don't know about Finn, man. Those damn deer. I hit so many damn deer with my car. It's crazy. But like that's another reason too. I mentioned the road patrol. We have caribou dying over there getting hit too. So so when the caribou's on the road, we can put up signs, and watch the speed limit so no more get hurt, and enforce it, right?
Yeah. So when a caribou dies, like that's obviously sad, but the if we can get a hold of the carcass, like you can learn a lot from that. So they can tell if it's a female, if it's like pregnant, how well fed it is, if it's stressed, right? And then we're going to do a lot of DNA work in the future. So doing DNA analysis has gotten really cheap. So now we can sort out how caribou populations are related to each other. So, are the Saskatchewan populations related to Alberta, or are these populations becoming isolated? Because that's what happens when, the landscape gets carved up, the populations become isolated, and that's when you're really in trouble.
Yeah, so when that happens, we get a caribou, none of it's going to go to waste, We can make drums with it,
Yeah.
Caribou meat's really good.
Yeah.
So, I'll let you take what you want, but when it comes to me now, I'll feed me and the elders there, I'll have some caribou head too.
I only had caribou once up in Hatchet Lake.
Yeah?
Yeah. Brochet.
Well, yeah, it was nice eating it right on the open fire.
Yeah.
And a lot of our cousins just go in the freezer and, whatever you want, big fish, and big chunk of meat. Oh, it was quite the experience.
So up there, like caribou are such an important part of people's diet. I remember one year in it was Brochet, when some friends of mine, the caribou didn't show up on time. They were late, and like it was like a food crisis in the community.
Oh yeah, food is expensive up there, man.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And I heard some stories where caribou get stranded on some islands or whatever, and when the word gets out, they go get them, and they have their own community deep freeze.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, if we ended up with like all this sort of alternate prey management, like we'd have tons of deer and moose, like more than like we could ever give away. Like the biologists don't think it's even possible to shoot enough deer to ever depress the population.
Maybe we can get into business. Maybe we'll have deer sausage. Maybe we'll go down there to Nisku and see if that guy can take some deer there, our Cree buddy there. So if you're listening, we're over here there. I forget his name though, but I imagine we do some research, we can find him.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
So the last slide I wanted to present here is on executing. So this is a big project that's going to be done over like a long period of time, and we can't lose sight that agreements mean that like both parties have to do things. And so the first thing we're going to start on is planning and doing the restoration work. It's the biggest task that requires the most manpower and the most time.
Yeah, so if any members out there listening to me, I'd rather hire you than bring in outsiders or whatnot. So, please apply. Or if you know anybody, just let them know what's going on here. We're going to be accepting resume, and maybe we'll start doing some hiring here in April, May. Let's start. We signed an agreement, now let's start fulfilling it.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a lot of collaboration with other governments and monitoring entities. So that's like largely the job of our department. That takes like a lot of time and effort to set these projects up. Like we want to sort of move forward on the Guardian program. Like we have a little pilot running now. We need to grow it. And then one of the things that is our department's long-term approach is protected areas. And so the green areas on the map that you can see there, those are big blocks of land that we're proposing become protected areas managed by Cold Lake First Nations. That's going to take some time, a lot of effort, and a lot of work. And it's not a guaranteed outcome. Like, this is a military weapons range, right? Like, the military's got to agree. And it's not clear what's going to happen on some of these things. And that's the big challenge, is that Canada and CLFN go into it with good intentions, but this is a complicated problem. And like, at least now we know not everyone's our enemy, right? We know there's some people on our side, which helps, but nobody should be under the impression that this is going to be easy. And on the edge of all this stuff, the sort of core components, we have some side projects we're working on that are driven by, particular ideas. So one of them is, like Kelsey was mentioning, like road patrol. So AWN over by like Hinton Grand Cache area, they currently already do this. So if you Google it up, like, you can see their program. I'm going to fly some Caribou surveys this year, so we're going to start sort of towing into some of these waters, but all these actions take people. They take people, they take trucks, they take snowmobiles, they take fuel, they take tons of stuff that, we're working as hard as we can to build towards. But, it's a long trip, right?
And we want to train our members where they can take the lead, Like, if we can build up our members to do these jobs, capacity building, whatever you need, we're there for you. My colleagues say the same things. We're there for you. So, if anybody interested in this type of work, feel free to apply. And we're going to share Maria's email here, and you can start sending her emails.
Yeah, and on that side, there's Maria. Like, our department runs programs every year, and so every year we have summer students, and so this will start becoming a component of our summer student program. We're also going to do a lot more aquatic monitoring this year, lakes and fisheries and stuff. Yeah, that's for a different presentation.
And to get the kids involved too, we can arrange a field trip to go show them what we're doing. Maybe they can do a little education on it in school. Get my cousin Dwayne to help out. He's currently helping out, singing with the youth at the school. So, and he's doing a good job since the drum was reintroduced to the community a few years ago. So I'm really proud of Dwayne. If you're listening, Massey.
He's not. He doesn't have Facebook.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He got rid of it. He didn't want no more drama.
Okay, so that's all I got for slides. Do we have any questions there, moderators? No?
It takes a couple minutes just because of the delay. But.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Well, yeah, that was sort of the story. So what was it like going to Ottawa?
Oh, it was really good. It was a good experience, and that was the third time going there, talking about the boreal forest. And it's one thing. It's good to talk, but you can talk all day, but implementing something, it's good, and I'm glad somebody's listening, and somebody took us serious, because it's very dear to me when you talk about the environment, right? And when you talk about traditions and safety, what about the animals? Who talks for the animals? Who talks for the four-leggeds? I don't know, man. Just price of food too, food sovereignty. And we talk about deer, and maybe you should really think about it, because it costs lots just for a piece of steak these days. Yeah. Even meat, fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And getting more people out on the land and harvesting more food, that's a food sovereignty issue, but. I guess our department, we got to defend people's ability to do that, and we need to, we want people to go on the land and hunt and fish.
So if there's any more meetings there with Saskatchewan, Alberta, I know Canada had the right people at the table, but I would like the right people at the table from Alberta and Saskatchewan. If you guys are listening, put a call out to you, and we're going to be involved in the Saskatchewan range plan too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so. This is just the Alberta side, but we'll be in Saskatchewan.
The Saskatchewan range plan is been sort of published. There's a draft up on the Saskatchewan government website. I went to a meeting back before Christmas, I guess it was, and we sort of went through it. Alberta is just so much more complicated. Mm-hmm. There's so much more oil and gas development. There's so much more money. So there's literally billions of dollars of infrastructure in the air weapons range. But on the Saskatchewan side, there's not.
It's still pristine here.
It's still pristine, right? And so they have a lot more management options. It doesn't need to be as intensive. And so that's where the protected areas idea, I think, really is likely to go ahead first if it goes ahead.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to talk about Caribou, and they're free and welcome to come down to the office and we'll talk about it. Or if you want to make an appointment, we can do that too. Yeah. We have nothing to hide. We're just trying for the better. Trying for the better of the community and the Caribou and the environment, and just to bring a balance.
Yeah, so the text of this agreement, like I put a link up on our consultation department Facebook page. So that's not the final draft. Like there was a couple of changes that were made, but like by and large, that's like what it says. And the changes that were made were like minor, like wording changes, like nothing that really made a big difference. But that's like Kelsey's right. There's nothing. This is a good news story, we think, right? There's nothing here to be super concerned about, except if you're us and you got to actually somehow get it done. Like that's the hard part. That's the part to worry about.
It's one thing to be in the office, but it's another thing to be out in the land, and it can be a struggle there at times too. And safety has to be a big thing there too, right?
Yeah, like it's too cold to go out skidooing around up in the Clyde right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, so if you're out there, I'm hoping you're wearing your leotards there, and it's pretty cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold, man. Yeah, and then if there's anybody who's interested in going up to the Clyde, and you're not on the access list yet, you can come to the office and get an orientation and be able to go up to the weapons range. We can sort of show you, where you can go, what you can do. There's really great hunting up there. Right now, the snowmobiling is probably incredible up on Primrose. If you got a skidoo, you can go anywhere on the Saskatchewan side right now.
Well, I guess I can make a call out to anybody else who wants to work with us, and we can be a visitor, and they can help us. We give them orientation, and we can bring them up there if anybody's interested. I don't know how in depth they can work with us, but we can try.
Yeah.
That's all we can do is try.
I mean, anybody who's been to Primrose is an incredible spot. Like, it is one of the coolest places I think I've ever been. It's empty, it's remote, and it's like 40 minutes from town.
Area 51. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No questions.
So we don't have any questions yet? Well, that makes it easy.
Yeah, well, you know how to get contact me. You can always, I'm on Facebook, or my email is kelsey.jacko@clfns.com.
Yeah.
clfns.com. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Or just phone the band office, and I'll take your call if I'm around, or take a message.
Yeah, and if you're looking for me, I'm either at the PLC building or I'm out at our department shop in eBay, like in the old fire hall there. You can find me around there, and I'm interested to talk to people, find out what they think, like how we should go about doing this. And
He might be in the bush too. You might have to send him a smoke signal. They don't get signal everywhere.
Yeah. So this is we just thought we'd give this a whirl, see how it works. The IT guys had a bunch of new toys they wanted to play with, but we'll try to do this more often. Like, I think it's important that we get this information out there because like Kelsey said, there's nothing to hide here. Like, this is
I don't know about this global warming. I'm kind of getting confused. I think it skipped Alberta here. It's getting pretty cold, but but something has to be done. The caribou are. The population's not doing very good. They continue to decline, and and it's been a few years since I reached out to Canada. So I'm glad we signed something. And I know other similar bands signed agreements, but I'm kind of still waiting on what they signed too. So.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere in Canada you go, like, these are the same conservation measures, right? Like, protect the existing habitat, restore the disturbance, and manage the populations. Like, they're all the same. That these tools have been known to be the tools for like decades. Like, it's not a secret. It's just about how you implement them. Yeah. And how Alberta implements them is they fly around with helicopters shooting wolves. And like, if you're in our department's office or you have to go talk to council about this stuff, it becomes obvious, or elders or leadership, like, you just realize really quickly that this is not the way that it ought to be done. Mm-hmm. And like, how should it be done? I don't think anybody's got that answer, but we got some new tools we're going to try.
Ethan, that's the word for Caribou and Denny. So, yeah. So I guess we'll wrap it up. So that's a wrap.